My body is a living temple of love. My body is a living temple of love. My body is the body of the goddess. 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 Your body is a living temple of love. Your body is a living temple of love. Your body is the body of the goddess. 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 The body is the very first temple that we know that houses the spirit. That is to say, it houses the breath of life, all of our dreams, all of our love. And as that sacred temple, the body deserves reverence, healing, kindness, and care. Each of us is the body of the goddess. This is devoid of race, of gender, of ethnicity, of sexuality, of class, of past. There is nothing that separates us under the mantle of the goddess and her vast and eternal love. She arises from within each one of us every time we speak a word of love, every time we think a thought of compassion, every time we create a trajectory of healing for ourselves or another. The goddess is within us, welling up, springing forth like sacred water from a stone, from a cleft in the earth, or from a gushing tree. There are miracles to be had in each body. Each body is capable of vast pleasure. Each body is capable of endless possibility, infinite possibility. This is what I learned from Lady Lorian Vignier of the Temple of Isis in Geyserville. She taught me a practice to breathe in to the inner sanctuary and find that seat of the goddess, that throne of Isis within, and then to breathe out infinite space, that there is always room for love. Despite the many trials and tribulations that Lorian faced in her life, she nonetheless always brought love, care, and compassion to each interaction I ever witnessed her in, whether it was with an animal or a human, whether it was with a plant in her garden, or whether it was just standing and looking over the property of Isis Oasis, knowing that there were 1,000 details to be taken care of, and knowing that with the grace of Isis, each one would be fulfilled in its right and proper time. I'm Yeshe Matthews, and I learned about Isis from Lady Lorian and also through the Fellowship of Isis. In ancient Rome, Isis was known as the throne upon which the kings sat. She was the ground of being for ethical leadership, rulership, and power. She was also the seat of magic, of life itself, bringing forth her divine child, bringing forth the breath of life with which she restored Osiris. She was not only the power behind the throne, but the power of the entire universe. And she was mistress of the heavens, mistress of all that is. Today, Isis serves as that same role model, exemplar, inspirator, and agent of change in our lives. When we sit in contemplation in friendship and camaraderie, in reverence, and in creative reverie, she is there. When we begin within, we can feel and connect with the mighty hand of Isis, there massaging our heart, stirring our lives, and urging us forward with a gentle push at the small of our back to create positive change for ourselves and others. In what ways have you possibly neglected your body as a temple? Have you vilified it? Have you treated it as an enemy? For those of us who struggle with a variety of different things like weight, pain, chronic illness, or even other types of physical limitations, it's difficult, isn't it, to sometimes think about the body as a holy temple? Instead, we're tempted to think about the body as an adversary. Why aren't you doing what I want you to do? Why are you hurting? I thought we were friends. We might sit like a child in confusion, wondering what became of the health, the vibrancy that once was with us in our lives. Sometimes as we're aging, we feel betrayed by our own desire for that kind of youthful springing forth. The spirit may be willing, but sometimes the flesh is weak. As a growing population, an aging population, and a diverse population with many different types of abilities and conditions, how can we, as practitioners of goddess spirituality, remember that the body is our very first temple? We can do it by blessing the body each day, by raining down holy waters upon it, by anointing it with sacred oils, by wafting incense, sage, or sacred herbs around the body, by feeding it nutritious, nourishing foods. We can honor the body with gentle stretching, movement, dance, and expression, song, breathwork, yoga. We can honor the body with affection, tenderness, pleasure, kisses, and love. There are so many different ways that we can remind ourselves that the body is the first temple in which we know the goddess. But we have to remember that our body is, in fact, that temple. We have a tendency to sometimes neglect ourselves in order to serve others. Sometimes we neglect ourselves because we feel angry, ashamed, or disappointed in the way that things have gone in our lives. There are many different possible ways that our fear and shame and scarcity and anger and resentment might negatively impact the body. So we have to be vigilant against this. It is an external paradigm imposing itself on us, a thought form that grafts itself to our flesh and makes itself real. That resentment, that fear, that discomfort, or that degradation. Stop right now, whatever you're doing, and give yourself a hug. Wrap your arms around yourself, cuddle yourself. Say to yourself, thank you, sacred body. Thank you, sacred temple. You are the vessel of the goddess. And then look around at the bodies of all of those people who are in your life, your family, your friends, your co-religionists, others who walk past you in the market or the bank, everyone around you, and acknowledge each of them as the body of the goddess. What a different world we might have. How much less violence might there be if each of us just took a moment every day to acknowledge the body of the goddess within ourselves and within everyone around us. I am goddess and you are goddess. We are all the vessels of goddess. Take one more minute and draw in a deep breath. Feel the aliveness of oxygen making your blood rich and red. Each and every one of us has that same red blood. each and every one of us has that same sacred flowing river, that Nile of blood, pumping forth from our hearts and giving us nourishment, life, growth. What a poor thing to do to neglect this. Instead, let us love it and honor it. And in doing so, when we love and honor our own bodies as temples of the goddess, we then begin to craft principles and different methods of being in the world that acknowledge that reality, that goddess is present in each body and in each thing. In the Fellowship of Isis, the manifesto, Lady Olivia Robertson wrote, "The fellowship respects the freedom of conscience of each member. Our freedom of conscience is that will of the goddess moving through us." Further, Lady Olivia wrote, "The fellowship reverences all manifestations of life. Life itself is that flowing river of goddess. And to be life-affirming rather than life-denying, that is to say, to support all activities that are for life, gives us the opportunity to connect with that great life-giving goddess. And death is part of life. So for all of those who honor and acknowledge and are present for that sacred moment of transition, whether as a death doula, as a companion, family member, or friend, that gift of being present as life transforms itself, as life changes, is also a form of reverence. The fellowship goes on, the Fellowship Manifesto goes on to say, "The fellowship accepts religious toleration and is not exclusivist. All of us who are on the path, trying desperately to find that which is holy, trying to hold to it, to abide by it, and cling to it, are part of this great web of life that is the goddess. And whether or not other religions recognize us as goddess practitioners, we can recognize them. And perhaps by us, in our choice to drop our adversarial nature to other religions and belief systems, perhaps there's an opening in our doing that so that we can then set the example so that others might feel safe to do that as well. Because the exclusive and dogmatic types of religion that hold rules designed to keep others out, to define oneself against another, these religions are motivated by fear. And they're motivated by a fear of acceptance, because in acceptance, all of our boundaries dissolve and there's a great oneness. And that oneness is intimidating. Think about the quote from the Bible that no one shall look upon the face of God and live. If we were all together in that oneness, would we not be looking upon the face of God, goddess, in every being? The fear of looking upon that divinity in each being occasionally is interpreted as a rule or a dogma that blocks us from communion and connection. But if we as goddess practitioners and those of us who are in those other faiths or who cross over between faiths as well, if we set that example of interfaith tolerance and of affirming each other's right to be, if we just continue to do this, as Lady Olivia set out in this manifesto, we have this opportunity to change that paradigm. Going on in the Isis Manifesto, the fellowship believes in the promotion of love, beauty, and abundance. No encouragement is given to asceticism. The fellowship seeks to develop friendliness, psychic gifts, happiness, and compassion for all life. Is it possible that we sometimes in fearing or loathing our bodies, in holding them as adversaries, or even just in neglecting them, forget that love, beauty, and abundance are our birthright? It's possible that sometimes in our pursuit of a sense of science and rationality and logic and reason, that sometimes we forget that beauty exists for its own sake. It does not need to be logical. It does not need to have a reason. And some of our work in the world is to dismantle the structures that would prevent every being from having access to love, beauty, and abundance. So if this means tearing down the walls of gender stereotypes, then let it be so. If this means tearing down the walls of ignorance that block us from honoring each ethnic group and race's beautiful expressions of love, beauty, and abundance, then let those walls be torn down. If sometimes we are feeling a fear of speaking out or being open about our beliefs, our psychic gifts, our abilities to heal, perhaps that is because we've been beaten into submission by fear and by a sense of stagnation. What would happen if you undammed that river? What would happen if you released that flow? If you just allowed yourself to speak? What would happen if you just allowed yourself to be? To be in that love, beauty, and abundance is to be in compassion for all life, each expression of joy met with joy. Somebody comes up to you and says, I'm feeling so excited because I had a communication with my ancestor. Instead of doubting them or fearing what that might mean, what if we just met that with approval and joy and affirmation? The Fellowship of Isis Manifesto goes on and says, the College of Isis has been revived after its suppression 15 years ago. The Fellowship of Isis itself has always been alive in the inner planes, that is to say, in that inner temple, the body temple, where we carry Isis Aset. It is from these inner planes that the return of Isis has been inspired. And then the manifesto goes on to describe some of the structures for members. And all of these structures that are designed for members are designed to be accessible and available to all. And this, too, is an expression of Goddess. The willingness to acknowledge that some people might need to perform their rites in a solitary way, and others will join in Iseums, and others will study in Lyceums, and others will meet still in different types of orders and different types of gatherings and groups. That each of these different types of expression is an expression of Goddess. Here, at the foundational root of the institution of the Fellowship of Isis, we find the vastness of her great wings that enfold all, that cover all, that beat a rhythm and breathe life into all. When we follow the Fellowship of Isis code of ethics, it means that we are looking into not only the teachings of Lady Olivia, but we're looking into the teachings that transcend all different spiritual paths and are true to all. A truth is either proven by fact, or else it might be something that we all know to be true for all beings. We all know that healing, healthy, nourishing foods are good for every single human being. Therefore, they should be a right. We all know that the ability to seek out skillful medical care is something that is good for everyone, and therefore it should be a right. In the statement of the Code of Ethics of the Fellowship of Isis, Lady Olivia writes, "In Isis we rely not on rules and regulations, but on the divine power of her winnowing wings of protection. In her we trust." The late Lydia Rule, designer of the many different goddess banners that travel to conferences and events all over the world, put it similarly. She said, "I trust the goddess." When each of us places our trust in the goddess as the body of ethics to which we report, then we know that if we make an error or a mistake, it is Isis herself who will correct our course. We know that if others wrong us, it is Isis herself who will correct their course. We know that if harm or war or greed threaten to tear apart the earth, that if we place our faith in Isis and in the actions that honor the body temple of each being, that all of those things, war, greed, and suffering, can be avoided, averted, or at the very least minimized. So we have, as members of the Fellowship of Isis, a responsibility to live in trust of the goddess. Each of us has the right to pursue our faith paths, our different identities, our different ways and rights, according to our own inner knowing that exists in those inner planes, that knowing which is the voice of the goddess, speaking through us and to us. Therefore, the Fellowship of Isis is multi-faith, multiracial, and multicultural. It says here in the Manifesto of Ethics, in the Statement of Ethics, one purpose is to bring spiritual balance between the masculine energy and the feminine flow, encouraging the inner harmony of the two forces within ourselves. Therefore, the Fellowship of Isis is dedicated to the honoring of all the goddesses, gods, and pantheons throughout the planet. All members retain their own faith and beliefs and are encouraged to blend their own practices with those of the Fellowship's own liturgy. However expressed, all members acknowledge the divine attributes of the goddess, love, beauty, and truth, and membership is open to all who follow these principles. Truly there is room underneath her mighty wings for us all in our many different expressions. Isis, our queen, is a goddess for our times. Even now, as we look at how her name has been co-opted to represent the organizations of terror that threaten the places where she once held her power most strongly, we ourselves are able to see that she may well be inserting herself through her own name into those spaces where that healing and that grace is needed the most. Just think, if only a handful of terrorists or soldiers against love could feel for one moment in their hearts that grace of Queen Isis, our goddess, that grace of Aset. Imagine here in the U.S. if our police officers could look for one moment into the black and brown faces of the people of this land and see the shining eyes of the great goddess. Would they be so quick to draw their weapons? I don't think so. Further, I believe that in any time when there is a choice to be made between doing the right thing or doing something that will cause great harm to someone, we can take a moment and look at them. No matter how angry we are, sad we are, no matter how ill-favored they may seem to us in the moment because of our human emotions, we can take that moment and look into their faces, into their hearts, and see what little bit of goddess might dwell there. Even the tiniest spark of goddess riding the breath, riding the heartbeat is enough to give us that freedom to move beyond our lesser impulses and into her divine grace, which affirms life and its right to exist, even if it disagrees or must set a boundary or must be in some way apart from a particular ideology or practice. Going on in the Statement of Ethics, the Fellowship of Isis represents the freedom of conscience of each member. There are no binding vows or commitments to secrecy. All fellowship activities are optional and members are free to resign without question. Membership is also free. By not setting up barriers of finance, of different levels of status or of secrecy, the Fellowship of Isis truly represents that vastness of her great wings enfolding all. There is no one turned away from the mysteries of the river of life. There is no one turned away from the throne of self-sovereignty. There's no one turned away from any practice that gives joy and love and beauty and truth to their lives and to the world. Isis, as a global goddess for our times, is an exemplar. She is the throne upon which we can seat the new era of this planet. She is the throne upon which we can place the priorities of strong and solid food sources, clean, fresh, and flowing waters, resources of medicine. She is the throne upon which we can place graceful simplicity and the ability to relate human to human and heart to heart without the need for varying levels of privilege and power. She is the throne upon which we can place our faith and our power and know that it will be dealt with in a way that is ethical and right, rather than feeling boxed in by legal and political procedures that make us feel depressed, powerless, and fearful. Isis is a goddess of our times because her breath of life is the wind that moves all over the planet. It is not a boundaried thing. It acknowledges no borders. That breath that moves across our planet in the form of wind is the beating of her gentle wings. And just like that breath of life, that breath of air, that sacred wind that moves across the planet, ignorant of any border or boundary, moving equally through the barrios as well as through the penthouses, that wind is the spirit of Isis. And she's always here, always blowing, always breathing, always touching us. Our job is to open our minds and our hearts and allow her to come and dwell within us, and then to dwell through us in the world. When we act as agents of Isis, starting within, honoring the body temple, and then moving on to our organization, the Fellowship of Isis, as well as any other organizations or traditions to which we belong, and then moving even further out to express ourselves in the greater world as agents of Goddess, we're doing her sacred work. That is the way to change our world for the better. It starts with small activities, nourishing ourselves, drinking plenty of water, turning and offering food and water to others, thinking about ways we can be healing agents without taking away anyone else's self-sovereignty. There are so many other things that we can do to act as agents of Isis and her power in the world. We can start our own nonprofit organizations. We can raise money for charities. We can contribute to charitable causes. We can go out into the world and honor the divinity in each being, regardless of how they respond, regardless of how they treat us. And when we do this, we are able to glimpse just one spark of the sacred light of the divine mind of Isis, who is as vast as the heavens, as numerous as the stars in all of her many wisdoms. So let us turn our faces toward the sun. Let us turn our faces toward the stars, toward all those sparks of light. Let us lean into the wind and welcome the breath of the goddess. Let us look upon this planet and her sacred waters and the sacred land, the source of all our nourishment, as companions and as reverent guests of our spirit. We are the ones who are allowed to honor and tend to the earth. The earth will also tend to us, but let's not forget that she will be here long after we are gone, and it is our privilege to be able to honor her in this lifetime and in any lifetime. When you find that breath, that river, that spark of light within, and you carry it out into the world, acknowledging all the different bodies of the goddess, you are, in fact, her priestess, her priest, her priestess. You are coterminous with her, one with her, and you are her agent. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for being that. Thank you for doing that. And may your work be blessed.